Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and these are the headlines. Lesotho is slapped with the White House's highest tariff rates released by President Donald Trump. The U.S. has a big trade deficit with Lesotho, which sells textiles and diamonds to America. The future of the trade deal, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is now into question. Other American measures having an impact on the continent. The USAID, France 24, caught up with the State Department's deputy spokesperson, who says the US just wants to ensure that it's being spent in the right way. And workers employed on France's military bases in Senegal are still worried about their future, as French troops are set to completely withdraw from the country. US President Donald Trump has called tariffs the most beautiful word in this dictionary. Some African countries might beg to differ. Lesotho was slapped with White House's highest tariff rates in a list released on Wednesday. It means Americans bringing goods in will have to pay an additional 50% import tax. Other countries were hit, like Madagascar with 47% and South Africa 30%. South Africa Minister of Trade says they are now actively working towards new opportunities.
Partnerships for mutual benefit are certainly under threat from unilateral tariff measures. Therefore, South Africa will not be left wanting in this trade tussle. We are actively working towards new opportunities and new markets for our goods and services, and working with partners to see the value of mutually beneficial partnerships. We recently returned from a trip in Japan, which was led by our Deputy President, together with a team of ministers. I'm happy to report that we secured in Japan a willing and respectful partner.
So Trump's measures are raising concerns about the future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, also called AGOA. The trade deal with the US has been crucial for industries like textiles in Lesotho and automotive manufacturing in South Africa. Tom Kennedy has more from Cape Town.
Now, Trump has labelled South Africa as amongst the worst offenders, treating the US very badly, in his words, and will incur a 30% tariff. Platinum and other metals needed by the US will be exempt, but the car and agricultural sectors will be hard hit. Now, this is, according to Trump, a balancing of trade deficit from the US, meaning it's trying to balance its imports and exports with other trading partners. And Trump said that American taxpayers have been ripped off over the last 50 years. Now, Lesotho, the small southern African country which exports diamonds and textiles to the US, will incur a staggering 50% tariff. Now, textiles represent 90% of Lesotho's exports. And half of its population live below the poverty line. So these tariffs are likely going to have a huge effect on Lesotho. It will also likely mean the end of AGOA, the free trade agreement signed by Bill Clinton to foster economic growth and jobs in sub-Saharan African countries. These tariffs will go into effect on April 9.
And in March, the US announced the end of the program review by the United States Agency for International Development. 83% of aid has been cut, and many African countries will be impacted. France 24's Fraser Jackson caught up with US State Department's deputy spokesperson, Mignon Houston, and asked her about USAID pulling out of Africa and elsewhere.
We have been very clear in telling people that we're not cutting foreign aid. We're just realigning it towards this administration's values, the values that were voted in by the American people. That means, as it relates to foreign aid, emergency assistance, food assistance, humanitarian assistance is still being approved. And that includes water, it includes food, it includes shelter, it includes those dire resources that are necessary in conflict zones. So I think just to focus on the fact that we are not done in the foreign aid business, as the Secretary has said, we are essentially just realigning much of that money to ensure that it's being spent in the right way.
So let's bring in now our guest tonight, Dr. Alan Maina. He's the Chief of Public Health at UNHCR. Dr. Maina, welcome. So the UN Refugee Agency basically is in charge of essentially delivering healthcare for nearly 13 million refugees. So What's the impact of that slashing?
Thank you, Clarice. And as you rightly noted, with the current financial situation, we fear that close to 13 million refugees, including over 6 million children, run the risk of not being able to access life-saving health and nutrition interventions. Over 50% of these 13 million refugees are in Africa. Africa is a continent that is hosting millions of refugees, and governments have been very generous, but they're also facing a lot of challenges, including a decline in health expenditure. What we're fearing is that essential services will be disrupted, running an increasing risk of disease outbreaks, children suffering malnutrition, untreated health conditions, mothers delivering in unsafe conditions, thus increasing the risks of maternal and newborn deaths. We also fear that we'll be seeing more mental health issues. Facilities are being overwhelmed significantly by the current funding situation. And basically what we are saying is that the health consequences we fear are expected to be devastating.
So the announcement was issued in March, and I know you've been in the field. So have you already witnessed the consequences of these cuts?
Yes, Clarice. Unfortunately, the impact is severe and immediate. I'll give 3 examples. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where UNHCR's health services has been cut by close to 90%. We're seeing that some facilities that are overwhelmed with limited staffing, they're running out of medicines and supplies, the water systems are disrupted, and increasing the risk of infectious disease outbreaks, putting the lives of more than 500,000 refugees in the country at risk of even death itself. We also have Mozambique, where we are working closely with the government in a settlement called Maratane, serving both refugees and host communities. This facility saw over 80,000 visits last year. The funding has been cut by more than 50%, and the UNHCR and its partners are trying their best, but critical services are affected, including mental health and psychosocial support, HIV and TB testing and treatment, and even access to safe maternal care. And lastly, also a very daunting example in Ethiopia, where we are seeing that our partners, we are having to shut down certain nutrition facilities, and we've seen children being discharged abruptly or prematurely. And we all know that this runs the risk of more life-threatening consequences for over 80,000 children who are affected in that location.
So, Dr. Meina, what's next? Does your organization have a plan to face challenges ahead?
Yes, we do have a plan. UNHCR has been there for decades. We continue standing with refugees, and we're working together with governments and partners closely to mitigate or limit the impact of this funding situation. We're doing our best to work as efficiently as possible, but it is difficult. We're having to make very difficult decisions. And I would just like to noting that we don't have enough time, that it is a time of crisis. And this is a crisis on top of a long-standing situation of low funding for humanitarian situations. And what we're calling for is that we stand for humanity and be able to see individuals, governments, donors, private sector, not forgetting refugees and the people who are generously hosting them. We need to save lives, not lose lives.
Dr. Meina, we hope that your messages will be heard. Thank you very much. Dr. Alan Meina, he's the Chief of Public Health at UNHCR. Thank you very much. And meanwhile, alliances are forging elsewhere. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held talks in Moscow with his counterparts from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The outcome is a commitment from Russia to help the joint armed forces of the Alliance of Sahel States to fight a jihadist insurgency. Let's listen to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
On my part, I have stressed Moscow's readiness to promote all the possible ways to build up the potential of the joint forces of the Sahel states and increase the combat capabilities of the national armed forces of each of the 3 countries. This includes the training of military personnel and law enforcement officers.
So as France is losing his influence in West Africa, French troops are set to completely withdraw from Senegal by the end of 2025, as requested by President Diomaye Faye. But the Senegalese workers employed on France's military bases in the country are feeling apprehensive. Despite measures offered by the French army, many remain uncertain about their future. Our correspondent Caitlin Kelly has more from Senegal.
Pape Alioune has been working as a forklift operator for the French forces in Senegal for nearly 3 years. Spending his time in a warehouse, he is one of 162 employees of French military sites in Senegal who will be laid off this coming June, one of the consequences of the French troops' departure.
We were surprised. It's difficult given the conditions. With current inflation, it's difficult to lose your job. These are state and diplomatic decisions. There's nothing we can do about it.
To support workers in finding new jobs, the French military organized a job fair for Pape and his colleagues. They have also granted a severance lump sum of 1.9 million euros to be shared among those losing out. The union representing these workers has appealed to the Senegalese government, also advocating for their possible recruitment into the Senegalese army. Although nothing is confirmed, Senegal's Minister of Labour says the option is under consideration.
We have received a recommendation from the Prime Minister asking us to work with the Ministry of the Armed Forces to see what can be done to assist these people and redeploy them. I've received a letter from the Ministry of the Armed Forces to that effect. A committee has been set up to look into the possibility of reintegrating them into the army.
The handover of military installations from France to Senegal began this March and is expected to be completed by the end of 2025.
An update about Prince Harry's charity work in Africa. Britain's charity regulator has now opened an investigation into his organization a week after the Prince and the Board of Trustees resigned amid a dispute with the charity's chairwoman. Sentebale provides support for young people in Botswana and Lesotho, and Chair Sophie Shandoka accused the Prince of orchestrating a campaign of bullying and harassment to try to force her out. Prince Harry said he hoped the Charity Commission would uncover the truth about what caused him to resign as patron of Sentebale. And this concludes our edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.